The Panama Canal is undoubtedly one of the most critical choke points for the global economy. It connects over 140 sea routes and around 1,700 ports across 160 countries. It is essential for supplying North and South America and linking them with Europe and the megacities of East Asia. Recent events, such as disruptions in the Suez Canal and the Red Sea, have shown just how dramatic the consequences of failures in the world's major trade routes can be. The Panama Canal is not immune to such problems either, as it is slowly running out of water. Due to climate change, the Central American region is becoming increasingly dry, making it harder for authorities to source sufficient water to operate the canal. The record-breaking drought of 2023 forced repeated operational shutdowns, exposing the canal's vulnerabilities. This has sparked serious discussions about a more resilient alternative to the canal, and the proposed solution comes from Mexico. In December, Mexico inaugurated an ambitious infrastructure project that promises to revolutionize global trade. This massive corridor connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and according to Mexican officials, it could render the Panama Canal obsolete in the coming years. What is this mega project about? How does the Mexican government plan to transform global trade with it? And could it truly spell the end of the Panama Canal? Let's dive into these fascinating questions in today's video. Enjoy watching. For centuries, there have been ideas about the most effective way to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. For a long time, the only viable route was the extremely dangerous Drake Passage around Cape Horn at the southern tip of South America. Even the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés recognized the ideal conditions for a link between the oceans at the narrowest point in Mexico. Similarly, the German polymath Alexander von Humboldt proposed a connection across the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. The Tehuantepec Isthmus is the narrowest part of Mexico, stretching only about 200 kilometers between the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific Ocean, making it an ideal location for such a route. This is approximately the same length as the Suez Canal. Despite having well-thought-out plans for this connection as early as the 19th century, external circumstances repeatedly thwarted them. After gaining independence in 1821, Mexico was plagued by political unrest, economic crises, and revolutions. Although concessions were often granted to American companies, mistrust following the Mexican-American War and unstable business conditions repeatedly derailed projects. The United States had already identified another, more manageable location: Panama. For the full story of how the U.S. gained control over Panama, check out my dedicated video linked at the end. Ultimately, the Panama Canal opened in 1914, initially serving American interests by enabling more efficient and cost-effective transportation between their east and west coasts. However, over the past century, the canal has faced growing challenges. For one, the size of ships has increased significantly. Originally, only ships that met Panamax specifications could pass through the canal. But as massive ocean liners emerged, the canal became too small. Costly expansions were required, but even after these upgrades, there are still ships too large to pass through the canal. With rapid technological advancements, container ships could become even larger in the future, raising doubts about the canal's ability to keep pace. The Panama Canal also has limited resources. It relies heavily on fresh water to operate its locks. During droughts or changing rainfall patterns caused by climate change, the water supply is often insufficient, limiting the canal's capacity and occasionally rendering it non-operational. This issue is expected to worsen with continued global warming. Geopolitical shifts also pose a growing risk for the United States. The U.S. relies heavily on the canal, but increasing geopolitical tensions make dependence on a single trade route increasingly risky. As a result, Washington is closely monitoring the progress of a new project in its southern neighbor, Mexico. In recent years, Mexico has experienced rapid economic growth, emerging as a key production hub and closing the gap with industrialized nations. The Mexican government is investing heavily in infrastructure and new projects, reviving plans for a trade route across the Tehuantepec Isthmus. Since 2018, under President López Obrador, the project has gained significant momentum. He campaigned on a promise to economically develop Mexico's southern regions to bring them on par with the wealthier northern and central areas. The Atlantic-Pacific trade route became one of his flagship projects. It envisions an extensive interoceanic corridor featuring high-speed trains and state-of-the-art infrastructure to make trade between the world's oceans faster and more efficient than ever. The long dormant rail line between the oceans was modernized and reopened in December. The journey now takes just 3 hours, accommodating both freight and passenger transport. But the corridor is envisioned as much more than just a railway. It includes 2 seaports, multiple highways, 3 airports, a gas pipeline, and a fiber optic network. 10 modern industrial parks are also planned along the route. By 2050, the project is expected to contribute 1.6% to Mexico's GDP, attract $50 billion in investment, and create 550,000 jobs in the industrial parks along the corridor. This new route could take over a significant portion of Panama Canal traffic. For comparison, the expected transport time, including complete loading and unloading onto trains, is about 6.5 hours. The current journey through the Panama Canal takes 8 to 10 hours. Additionally, the Mexican route is much closer to the United States, drastically shortening transport distances. However, the project has faced criticism. Environmental groups warn of significant impacts on local ecosystems, including potential damage to flora, fauna, and water quality. There have also been reports of forced displacement of indigenous communities who see their local culture under threat. Nevertheless, the Mexican government appears determined to proceed. Economically, the project's prospects currently look very promising. Most economists agree that if well executed, the corridor could significantly boost Mexico's economy and elevate its influence on the global stage. Mexico's Navy minister declared that the country will become a global maritime power in the near future thanks to the corridor. Positive effects on the southern regions are already evident. In September 2023, new economic data showed that southern and southeastern Mexico experienced unprecedented growth after decades of stagnation, thanks to various mega-projects. According to reports, Mexico's GDP grew at an annual rate of 3.6% nationwide in the second quarter of the year. The 8 states in the south and southeast grew by 6%, double the rate of the northern states, and this mega-project is just getting started. For freight transport, the government estimates that by 2028, around 300,000 20-foot containers, or equivalent units, could be transported across the isthmus. By 2036, the capacity is expected to rise to 1.3 million containers. Does this mean the end of the Panama Canal? Not yet. Even the planned capacity for the coming years is still only a fraction of the annual cargo passing through the Panama Canal. However, if the Mexican corridor continues to expand in the coming decades and the Panama Canal faces increasing challenges, the Mexican route could become a true alternative, stepping in more frequently to support global trade.